Mannyman Does History. Throughout the 18th century, Dublin became one of the finest cities on the British Isles, and many of its great buildings were built during this Georgian period. Seeing the success of the American and French revolutions, Theobald Wolfe thought a republic is just what Ireland needed. So the United Irishmen led a rebellion, but they lost. After this, Parliament was taken away from Ireland and it became directly ruled from London, becoming incorporated into the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. Most of the land was still owned by Protestant families, but with the new Parliament in London, many of these families relocated to England, leaving some of the Irish estates vacant and neglected, with the poor Catholic peasants living on and working the land. Catholics began getting their rights back through Catholic emancipation, with many thanks to the politician Daniel O'Connell. The poor native Irish had grown dependent on the potato, and when it failed year after year in the 1840s, and the other crops had to be exported, hundreds of thousands, millions died of disease and starvation. Many too left the country for England and America, while many prisoners were sent to Australia. Ireland's population has never fully recovered since the Great Famine. Not knowing when the war might end, a group of Irish volunteers led by Pádraig Pearse decided to stage a rebellion in Ireland while the British were distracted by the war. The Easter Rising ended up being centred in Dublin, and ultimately the British outgunned the rebels and destroyed half of the centre of Dublin in the process. The ill-advised execution of the captured Irish leaders led to a massive gain in support to the Irish Republican cause. A few years later, the Irish Republican Army fought a guerrilla war against the British, driving them to a stalemate. During the fighting, the island was divided and Northern Ireland was created to appease the Unionists in the north. Michael Collins and others negotiated a treaty with the British which would create an Irish Free State, still loyal to the Crown. The treaty was passed, but the opposition, led by Eamon de Valera, was so strongly opposed it led to the Irish Civil War, which was harsh and bitter, pitting brother against brother. In the 1960s, seeing the civil rights marches in the USA, the Catholics of Northern Ireland began their protests against discrimination. Unfortunately, what began as peaceful protests escalated into violence, and the Troubles defined the North for decades. Meanwhile, in the Republic, Ireland, and indeed the United Kingdom for that matter, joined what became the European Union in 1973, and Ireland's economy really began to thrive into the 1990s, in a time known as the Celtic Tiger. Northern Ireland, after decades of bombing and killing, a ceasefire was called, and the Good Friday Agreement allowed for peace in the province. Queen Elizabeth II became the first English monarch to visit the Republic, and our President, Michael D. Higgins, visited the United Kingdom in symbolic gestures of peace and reconciliation over our long and tumultuous history together.